a strategy to break it down so that they could then blend the parts of the word together. So they need a strategy. Now, if you could read those long words, you are going to be able to get more comprehension. You're going to be more confident. You're going to have more interest. You're going to be more motivated to read. Super benefits. So literally, this is an issue that I addressed in my dissertation long, long ago, and then wrote curriculum materials and researched it over time. So this is my area of expertise, is teaching students to read multisyllabic words. And because many of the studies utilized rewards, the strategy, one of the strategies that is recommended is very close to the strategy that's in rewards. All right, but here is what is their first how-to step. So they broke it down into, you're going to teach multisyllabic words, and here's the first how-to step that you're going to teach. And that is to ensure that the students have the pre-skills necessary for reading long words. For example, they need to be able to recognize and say the correct sound for vowels and for consonants when they're single letters, as well as when they're combinations. So we need to check out what is their level of letter sound association knowledge, and can they apply that to single monosyllabic words, as well as simple words that are multisyllabic words. So the sounds we're going to teach. So these, and that they would have a routine so they could break the words down and decode them, that they would have spelling involved in those lessons, and that they would have many opportunities to read multisyllabic words. So if you just think about this aspect, I'm going to teach you to read multisyllabic words. I'm going to teach you the pre-skills. I'm going to teach you a routine. We're going to spell words. And we're also going to practice reading those words in isolation, in sentences, and in passages. So let's look at each of these. Now I can only give you a touch of what they would be. And because this is an area that I've done a lot of work in, I'm using examples from rewards. So how-to step one is to teach them vowel and consonant combinations. So these are this type of sounds students need to know with automaticity, that they know that the sound is a and the name is a, and the sound is e and the name is e. And they would know vowel combinations. The AY, the sound is A. Now some have major and minor sounds. So EA, first you try E, then you try E. EE, you try E, so that the students would know it. Notice how quick I was on those. And that's just to remind us we need automaticity. We don't want students to say, AY, that looks like me, and the sound is A, so that sound is A. No, they have to know A right away so they can sound out words with that. Now, in the practice guide, they suggest that we validate what the students know and teach them necessary vowels and consonants. I will tell you from my experience is that most of the students going into fourth grade, when we checked on their consonants, knew them. And were much weaker in vowels, and they were particularly weak in short vowels. A, e, I, was a challenge. So just have that in mind. And then, so this is the way we taught it in rewards. We'd introduce a sound, The letters are OA as in boat, and the sound is O. What sound? O. One more time. What sound? O. And then we would practice those sounds with cumulative review. Because we need to take this to automaticity, which means it's in permanent memory, we have mastery. They need lots of drill to ensure that this is automatic. Well, here's one thing that is also necessary, given that 80% of multisyllabic words contain a prefix or a suffix. Whoa, you better know these with automaticity. So in addition to checking out if they had the pre-skills of sounds, do they have the pre-skills of prefixes and suffixes? And so these are the prefixes and suffixes that we teach in rewards, but would be taught for any reading of multisyllabic words because they are the most common prefix and suffixes, occur in many words. And here's the suffixes. The challenge with suffixes is many of them aren't pronounced like you would expect. They have, for example, if you can follow my cursor, we do not pronounce this Sion. We pronounce it shun. We don't pronounce this as sieve. We pronounce it as sieve. We do not pronounce it as Tyal. We pronounce it as shul. So you have to teach these carefully to ensure the accuracy of the pronunciation. Then what was the next how-to? This is just, okay. They suggest that you teach a routine. And it was very interesting to read their summary from looking at so many studies, because they said, there's lots of routines out there. Pick one, teach it to mastery, use it, remind the students to use it so that they have a firm foundation in one routine. And it needs to be a routine with simple steps, where they are steps to break it down into decodable parts, and that they would be taught how to blend those parts into words. And that you should teach it with explicit instruction. And that means no matter what words you use, that you would model the routine. I do it. Provide guided practice. We do it. Provide independent practice. You do it. So this is the routine that's used in rewards, that is parallel to the one that's in the practice guide, that has forgive me, that has few steps that are very overt steps. So the students circle the prefixes, they circle the suffixes, they underline the vowels in the remainder of the parts, they read the parts, reconstruction, they say the whole word, reconstruction, they make it a real word. So this is the strategy from rewards, and it has been a very successful strategy. And so these are just examples. I circle the prefix, I circle the suffix, I underline the vowel. So I put it into decodable chunks. And then I read those parts, prevention, and then I say the whole word, prevention. It uses basically two pieces of knowledge to get them into decodable chunks, the affixes and the vowels. And then they read the parts, but they make it a real word. Of course, we don't want them to go through life having to circle the prefix, circle the suffix, underline the vowel, spread the part, say it fast, make it a real word. So they then are taught to look for prefix, suffix, and vowels, to put it into decodable chunks, say the parts of the word, say the whole word, and make it a real word. Okay, so we teach pre-skills. At least this, the vowel sounds. I would suggest the pronunciation of affixes. We teach them a strategy and we demonstrate it, guide them in that practice, check their understanding, and then we practice it and practice it and practice it. And that's one of the things I'll caution you. Some teachers, when they see a strategy, think, oh, tomorrow I'll teach the strategy, done deal. It took hundreds of practice words to get kids proficient at it if they were struggling readers. So it needs to be taught and practiced and practiced and practiced and practiced. And in the lessons, we have good research to show, as the writers of the practice guide concluded, we should have spelling embedded into lessons on multisyllabic decoding. And so one simple one is dictation. So I dictate a word and you repeat the word. Then we orally break it down into oral syllables. And then you say this oral syllables as you write the word. You look at the word to be certain it's correct. Then I show you the spelling and you compare your spelling to the correct spelling. If you missed it, you cross it out and rewrite it. So simple dictation could be one way that you embed spelling instruction in the lesson. All right, and then they need practice and lots of practice. I was so glad to see this was there because judicious practice, enough practice to get you to mastery is one of the big ideas of explicit instruction. And they said you could do this by reading words in isolation, reading words in sentences, reading words in passages. They would all be good practice. And so, for example, here we have practice reading words in isolation. These are not in context. And here, the students are practicing in fairly simple multisyllabic words, finding vowels. Remember, one big rule about multisyllabic words is every syllable has one vowel sound. Every syllable has one vowel sound. So, and then they read the parts, teammate, teammate. So we could do it in isolation. Those are simple ones. And here would be more complex. Circle the prefix, circle the suffix, underline the vowels, say the parts, considerable. Not able, considerable. That's that pronunciation. All right. So they could practice words that are in word families. They could practice in sentences. And so if you looked at these sentences, they're basically laden with multisyllabic words. But they're respectful to older kids. Mobility is important to kids of all ages so that they feel independent. See, that's not a first grade kind of sentence. And then we must respect the background knowledge of our older students, their experiences, and their age. And so just having sentences that are not baby stuff, they are looking for baby stuff. And so having it so that it honors them. And we could also give passages. And so these are just examples of the kinds of passages that would be useful for students being taught strategies for reading multisyllabic words because they have lots of multisyllabic words. Last night I was just going over this presentation and I came to another article I put in here and I had to read the whole thing because I had forgotten that Mama Rudolph, a great, great athlete, that at one time her legs were shrinking and she was getting weak, and it was all about her overcoming great, great challenges. And I thought, yes, this is the kind of passage I would want my 8th graders who is working on this. This would be appropriate for them. It would not be a put down in any way, and they'd be interested in it. So basically, judicious practice and reading words in lists, reading words in sentences, reading words in passages. Now, I will tell you, the writers of this practice guide are terrific. And not only were they perfect in terms of review of the research and picking out the best studies and then coming to conclusions and giving us recommendations, but they included resources that will be helpful. And for example, I just put in one example here from a study, a article by Jessica Toast, which I had to read the article. But here are other suggestions to give practice to students who are learning multisyllabic words. So these resources will be very useful for you. Okay, so that's the first one. And that is looking at reading multisyllabic words. Now, I am certain that the next one you already have something in mind. Provide purposeful fluence building activities to help develop students read effortlessly. And right away, I bet this came to your mind because we have educators here with great background knowledge. You said, I bet they're going to talk about repeated readings. And they are, but maybe with a little twist on it. And I found this one very useful to us because I can teach you to accurately read multisyllabic words, and I can work at the word level for fluency. But in terms of passages, how am I going to get you to read effortlessly? Well, let's see what their goals were. So their how to step one for this recommendation is to provide a purpose for each repeated readings. That's the twist. Instead of I read it and time myself, and I read it and time myself, and I read it and time myself, I could have different purposes for the readings. That makes such good sense. So it doesn't seem like it's so much like a robot just reading it. I'm going to read for this purpose. I'm going to read for that purpose. And that we'll also have some time we spend on prosody, where we have some expression. Because many of your kids would read like this: focus some instructional time on reading with prosody, versus focus some instructional time on reading with prosody. That's with prosody. And give them opportunities to read a lot of little short articles from a variety of topics, just a one read. So here we might have repeated readings, but now we're just going to have maybe once a week some articles that we're reading of things that might be of interest to you, so that they have different syntax, different structures, different topics, different words. Now, for example, in rewards, we do these very well, but we could probably add that. So, you know fluency. You know it when you hear it. Fluency is the ability to read text accurately with ease, expression, and appropriate pacing. Sometimes we have mixed this up only to rate. Fluency is the ability to read text accurately with ease, expression, and appropriate pacing. But we want the pace to be the pace of natural speech. I hope you went maybe to the session or will listen to the session by Jan Hasbro, Queen of Fluency. And when you're fluent, you're automatic at it. And as with anything, you're automatic at it, it frees your mind to focus on other information. So if I read the words fluently, I can focus on the content. And we already looked at the 3 fluency building activities they suggest: reading with a purpose, working with prosody, and reading a variety of texts, short texts, just once. Okay, and they suggest this reading could be silent reading. Now, we have found recently that we may want some students who are really struggling initially to do what we call whisper reading before silent reading, because they need to have the feedback and they need to stay on task. So whisper reading would be like this. 3 fluency building activities. So you might add that to your repertoire. I could ask them to read with partners, and they have a very good discussion in the practice guide on how to use partner reading in a structured manner. And we could read chorally together. And so if I was working on prosody, I might have the students read with me as they, I modeled the kind of expression that we might wish. Or maybe we're going to work on appropriate pace with speech level. And so they might chorally read it with me. But the big idea here is more than one purpose. They suggest that for this purpose, to build fluency, that we have some short content-rich passages. Content-rich, why not have them learn something whenever they can? Basically, my law is to use almost totally informational text at the middle school and intermediate grades for intervention. So they can learn something when they're doing it. And there should be multisyllabic words within it. And it would be useful if the vocabulary words that were essential to the passage were already taught. And they actually suggest that to build fluency, they might read that passage 3 to 4 times. We usually have 3, but some studies had 4. And each time there would be a different purpose. Let's see if you can read this at an appropriate rate. So the teacher might model appropriate rate that the students could get to a certain place in the reading within a minute, and then they practice that. Or with expression, or here's some questions that you're going to have to answer. So read for this information. Or read it through, and as you read it, underline words that you're unsure of, either the pronunciation or the meaning. Or read it through and be able to say what you learned from that passage, different purposes. Okay, and prosody. So you know that is reading with expression. And so in studies, they've had the teacher model prosody and often model a non-example of a lack of prosody to get the kids interested in expression, and then having them listen to the teacher read with prosody, and then they practice with prosody. And teaching them. We pause at commas, we stop at periods, we raise our voice or lower it with a question mark, and we have emotion with an exclamation mark. Teaching them that. And the last one is give them lots of opportunities to read different articles. It could be from a newspaper, it could be a short article related to what they're learning in their class, it could be a new game that came out that they're going to read about its features. So these they're going to just read once. And they're going to be different topics, different sentence structures, different writing styles over time. So maybe on Friday, it's Friday, and they're in intervention, and you dedicate 10 minutes to read an article, short one, with the purpose of having different topics, different writing styles. And all right, so we've got 2 down, but you're going to read more about it. I have total faith with you, my book club, that you're going to follow up on this. But we learned about teaching students how to read multisyllabic words, it's a major barrier. And so teaching that. And then working on fluency in terms of repeated readings with a purpose, and fluency in terms of prosody, and then doing lots of short reading to get that variety. The next one is comprehension. Of course, everything we've talked about is comprehension. You can read the words, you can comprehend, you know the meaning of the words, you're going to have better comprehension. So that if you read fluently, it's going to have better comprehension. This is the biggest section. Now, I'll just show you here to give you an idea. So these pages are the recommendations 1 and 2. These are all of the recommendations for for 3. Because what they did is they had part A routinely. So part A is to build students' word and word knowledge so that they can make sense of the text. So that is part A. Then part B, consistently provide students with opportunities to ask and answer questions to better understand the text they read. Part B. I'm showing this because we are in the book clubs, we've been breaking it down and studying each part. And C, having a routine for getting the gist. And D is how to monitor your own comprehension. So now, you have so much knowledge that when you read this, build students' world and word knowledge so that you can make sense of the text. I want you just to say to yourself, well, what might that entail? Giving them world and word knowledge. Okay, let's see if your background knowledge totally opened the gate here. So, world knowledge. So one part of it is to basically teach students background knowledge that they might need for that topic. Background knowledge. And they suggest in an intervention, spend 3 to 5 minutes introducing the topic. Maybe we're going to read something that is easier that introduces the topic. Maybe we're going to watch a short video clip. Maybe the teacher's going to make a presentation and maybe even pair it with pictures that will illuminate that body of knowledge. All right, so a short period of time teaching background knowledge. And then, I bet you thought about this. Now we're going to teach the meaning of a few words. And they call them in the practice guide essential words. I love that. Essential words. God, if I rewrite that curriculum, I'm going to put in essential words. We teach background knowledge and we teach vocabulary, but we don't use essential words. And so their essential words, they suggest this, very intelligent, that there might be a few of those words we teach beforehand, where we give them a definition. We might illustrate it with an example and maybe just oppose it to a non-example, maybe have a visual representation of the word, but we're going to teach the 1 or 2 most essential words. But then we're reading with students a passage, and we might, as we read it, stop and briefly tell them a meaning of an additional essential words, but it didn't get the same in-depth treatment as the 1 or 2 words done before. But then afterwards, we're going to have to work on those words. Maybe we'll have a log of those words. Maybe we'll write meaningful sentences about those words. Maybe we will practice them with flashcards with our partner. All kinds of ways that we could practice that vocabulary. So basically what they're saying is sort of what I said this morning of critical things that we do to promote comprehension. We give the students some background knowledge that's essential, and we teach essential words, my new vocabulary term. But also we teach them how to figure out on their own, how to figure out the meaning of a word. Now, this is the strategy that they say. You don't know a word, you underline it, and then you reread the sentence with the unknown word and look for clues. Then you reread sentences surrounding the sentence of the unknown word and look for cues to figure out the meaning. Remember this morning, I said one of my favorite strategies and basically utilizes those same steps, inside, outside. You look inside the word for hints, prefix, suffix, root. You look outside in the sentence and are there hints? And if that is not good enough, you look in the surrounding sentences for hints. And you ask yourself what the word might mean. Then you try it in a sentence and ask yourself, does it make sense? I found this one really successful, and they never forget it. Inside, outside, inside, outside. But there's another thing we should teach for word learning strategies, and they suggest we do systematically teach the meanings of prefixes and suffixes. Now, we taught them the pronunciation of prefixes and suffixes as we taught multisyllabic words. But now we're teaching the meanings of those prefixes and suffixes that would help them unlock words. So they provide resources again. And I also provided one for you that came from O'Connor's book on literacy. And they are in order by frequency of occurrence. And oops, forgive me. There. And so the order here would be frequency of occurrence. And then here are the suffixes in order of frequency of occurrence. So if I want to help students with vocabulary, I am going to teach them some essential words, some before, some during our reading, and then we're going to practice them afterwards. I am going to teach students how to unlock the meanings with context and prefix and suffixes. And the last thing is, and I want to follow up on the studies here because I have not found, and I'm certain there are, they wouldn't have it here, but I've read all the studies except I've got to locate the ones on Latin and Greek roots. But I thought you would like some resource. This one's not in the practice guide, but these are common Greek and Latin roots and their meaning and other words that contain them. So it's a cool resource for you also, because maybe you have taught path, feeling, or suffering, and then you have words like empathy. There it is. Sympathy. Showing the kids the relationship of these words. All right, so many things that we can teach. All right, let's see our time. You know, I never have enough time. Have you found that in your life? So I want to, though, talk about their recommendation 3, which is, again, to give them opportunity to both answer questions as well as develop their own questions. Now, the important thing about this section is that it's all wrapped around teaching students 3 types of questions. And this has been around a long time, and they used to have 4, but one of them proved not to be useful, which is asking questions where they would just use their own experience, didn't have to relate it to the text. So now the 3, Raphael's questions are write their questions, fairly literal questions. Who's the name of the character? Or think and search questions. So what are the main characteristics of that character that are emphasized by the author? And based on what the author told us about that character, do you think that most people would label that person generous or stingy? So 3 types. And the response would be, if it is a right there question, you have to find evidence right there. If it's a think and search question, there's more evidence in more than one place. And if it is an author me, then you're going to use what the author told, as well as what you know, putting it together, making an inference. And so they suggest, and I totally celebrate this, that we teach each to mastery, and then teach this one, and then teach this one. And that we give the students, excuse me, go back here for a minute, that we have them do it collaboratively after we've learned the 3 types, that they would work with partners or teams to come up with answers. And we would also teach them how to, having read it, to ask the same kind of questions, right? Their questions, questions that were search questions where more than one piece of information, or me and the author. So the main thing there is the different types of questions, those 3 big types. Well, the last one I want to talk about in this section is teach students to determine, have a routine for determining the gist of a short section of a question, of a text. So you've taught them the 3 types of questions to respond, and how to do that collaboratively, and how to do it on your own. But getting the gist has, as everything here does, very solid research of a benefit. And this is one that I have taught variations upon the gist theme in many cases, but there's 2 research validated practices that aren't in the, they talk about getting the gist, but these 2 are the ones that emerged in the research. One, see if I can get going forward, is called paragraph shrinking. And that was done by Lynn and Doug Fuchs and Pat Mathis. You read a paragraph, you stop and you ask yourself to name the who or what, the main person, animal, or thing. Then you tell the most important thing about the who or what. And then you say a statement putting this together that has to be 10 words or less. And so this one was predominantly a part of a program that was done in intermediate grades at the elementary level. And the teacher could guide it. Let's read this now. Name the who or what. Tell your partner. Now think what was the most important thing about the who or what. You could even have the students underline it. Now say the main idea statement in 10 words or less, and then have them write it down. Well, that one had very compelling research, but it was altered by Sharon Vaughn's staff to make it fit more difficult text, where they would, again, read a paragraph, and they would name who or what the paragraph is about in a brief phrase. Then they would identify 2 or 3 things that were useful on that topic in the paragraph, and they could underline it. And then they would shrink it down, uh, either say it or write it in 10 to 15 words. Basically, these are both, they have the same gist, but one was predominantly tested with elementary students and the other one with middle school. All right, so I just wanted to capture this for you. And then I said to myself, well, here, if you wanted students to get the gist, you'd better teach it. So I looked back in all my demonstration lessons, which I am blessed to do often, and pulled out a Getting the Gist lesson, which was done in intervention with 8th graders, and we were practicing getting the gist. So they were reading about Kenya, okay? And so some background knowledge quickly. So we learned about the location of Kenya on an eastern side of Africa. We honed in on it so we could see some of the countries as well as waterways that surrounded it. And then just a little comparison that both were British colonies, the United States and Kenya, but let's put this into context. Timelines are wonderful background knowledge. So we became a British colony in 1607 and declared our independence in 1776.
Nugget.
Lori, are you there? Can you mute? Thank you. And Kenya was a colony in 1883 later, and just became an independent country in 1993. Just wanted to have them have a comparison here. They were studying different countries that were part of the British colonies. And our intent was that they could write a gist statement, a main idea statement. And so I introduced the steps in it, and not surprising, I then modeled it. So I said, let's read it together. Now watch me. I'm going to name the who or what. This is about Kenya's borders. I'm going to think about 2 or 3 important details. So I underlined critical details, and now I need to shrink it. And I showed them that the way for me to shrink it is that I'm going to have some categories, because this is too many details to remember. But I could say, it is borders of 4 African countries. And then I put that together. Kenya, an East African country, is surrounded by 4 American countries and the Indian Ocean. And then I might have had to model it more than once, but we went to a We Do It. We again read the paragraph, and together I had them think about what the whole paragraph was about. I had them share with their partner. Then I called on a student, and the student said, this is about the history of Kenya. And so we highlighted that. And then I asked them to think about details, but not to underline yet, to think about critical details, then share with your partner what the critical details are, and support why you think they're the most important. And then I called on a student, and that student said, well, the most important details I want to remember from this is that Kenya was a British colony, and they got independence in 1963. So I said, okay, we're going to use your details. Now let's come up with a gist statement. And this was theirs. Kenya, once, ooh, I love this, once a British colony, comma, became an independent country in 1963. Well, we continued, we did more we do it's. They're not ready for you do it. So we did more together. We put it all together, and then we worked on revising it. I'm teaching kids how to revise their work by revising someone else's work that they don't care about changing it. And these were their suggestions on making it better. Wow. There's a lot of powerful things in this practice guide. And so much for us to think about. But I'm going to, at this point, open it up for any questions that float in. So I'm sending it back to one of our moderators. Did you see any questions in the chat that I should respond to?
Sally, if you can talk to us on those questions. I am responding to someone in the chat right now, direct message.
Okay. So one of the questions that I saw was reading development and difficulties book highlighted that there's no research to support repeated reading, that repeating reading helps. So, and they're worried that there's a risk for students to simply memorize the words.
Oh, well, first of all, it would not have been in this practice guide if there was not research to support it. I mean, they reviewed all the studies asking this question. They came up with the fact that repeating it, but not making it more meaningful with purpose. So reading it with one purpose, two purposes, three purposes, but that it would increase automaticity. So I'm not certain, but I have that book in my library and I will be checking on it. But I will also do this. I will take this part of the practice guide. I will turn to what is the research on studies that they reviewed on fluency. I'm going to turn the page right now. First of all, there's many on multi-syllabic words, and there they are. There are fluency studies with, there's 3 pages of the ones that they review, 4 pages of the ones that they reviewed. So why don't you check that out? It's on page 155 of your practice guide. Now, so I really, if we read through it one time for the purpose of reading it to ourselves to be sure we can read all the multisyllabic words, and then we read it with the teacher to work on the actual pronunciation of those words as well as on pace. And then I said, now you're going to read it one more time, and afterwards you're going to have to retrieve what it talked about and be able to share with your partner the most important information. I doubt if you would be memorizing it. So I am very interested in that. All right, if you want to follow up with an email, email me and we will. Do we have any other questions?
Here's another one for you, Anita.
Yes.
For kids that have lower reading comprehension,
yes.
Are there strategies in particular that work best for them? I'm thinking of kids that decode and read through the words, but then put so much focus on doing that their reading comprehension goes down.
Okay, so here's what you would want to do there. You would want to determine why their comprehension is low. So 1, you're going to check out their fluency, their automaticity. Just as you described the question, you gave me the idea that the students were putting all of their attention on the reading of the words, not the understanding. And so if the problem is that they can't read multisyllabic words or they don't have automaticity, that could interfere with their comprehension for sure. And then ask the question, what is their vocabulary? Is that interfering? So that you would have a way to target it. You know, I've had so many people say I have children who can read it quickly but have no comprehension. Well, that they may not have comprehension because of background knowledge or vocabulary. So do we have any other questions?
Here, I think I have it here, Lisa.
Okay.
What are your thoughts about the number of words students are expected to read as set forth by Dibbles or Fastbridge in order to be proficient? I often feel that we promote speed reading in order to have kids do well on those assessments.
You know, that could be a concern. And what I would do is talk, as Jan Husband does, about using rate of speech and as a measure, because the rate of speech would be fluent oral reading. And so, but now, is it useful to have those comparative measures? It has been useful again and again and again to have those fluency measures over time, but maybe in between the practice would be this repeated practice without a constant emphasis on racing or pace, but rather on different purposes. So I think the two could go together.
Yeah,
One
so
for
we
measurement, yeah.
we kind of joke that we don't want the kids to be auctioneers. It's kind of how you can talk to them about
Right,
it.
we want them,
Not
and
to
we
repeat.
model, you know, model with example or non-example, when it's read as if it was speech, if it was not read as speech, yeah.
So
Okay,
there's another question here. What passages do you recommend to use with the rewards program that would supplement the units? And this person went on to say, I noticed that there are passages later in the units in the program, but I would like to use something with the lessons as well.
well, so in rewards, we teach the pre-skills, then we teach the strategy for reading multisyllabic words, and then we provide practice. And as we're doing that, we are also embedding information, teaching of vocabulary and the meanings of prefixes and suffixes, and then we apply it to passages. Now, if you wanted to add passages that were read for the purpose of that, remember the one thing in Fluency was giving them short passages of a variety of things, occasionally, not every day, but like once, like I said on Friday, maybe the last 10 minutes we would read something. That would be totally appropriate. So now, do I have a wealth of those? No, don't I wish I did. So first of all, most schools, particularly elementary schools, would do some kind of screening measure 3 times a year, which is still best practices. But what you would want in any intervention is you would want formative assessment built into it. And so that's done in rewards, it's done in phonics for reading. In most intervention programs, every 3 to 5 lessons is a formative assessment. Do we need to give more practice? Do we need to emphasize something more? Can we go forward with more ease? So that kind of formative assessment should be much more often, coupled with those general ones that we are doing. So I'm looking more at the formative assessment, which might have accuracy involved in it, might have rate involved in it, it might have meanings of prefixes, suffixes, or words a part of it, it might have comprehension questions on a passage, so that we have that continuous. And I will tell you, one of the reasons that we have that every few lessons in rewards is that when we taught it without that formative assessment versus when we taught it with the formative assessment, 2 things happened. Number 1, teachers taught it with fidelity because they were going to be tested on that with formative assessment. That was a good thing. Number 2, the students saw their data. They could see their growth and their accomplishments, and their level of motivation went up. Now, if you look at the research on motivation, that it is very related to your level of success. And so that is a critical thing is to set the kids up, teach them well, do the assessments, show their success, then they're more motivated to do it. Motivation doesn't come before your success. Success comes before motivation. I don't think I've ever ended a session early.
There are
So
so much other
kind
questions.
of a miracle. Yes.
There are a few more questions that popped up.
Great.
Hold on. Who is rewards most appropriate for? Reading level or percentile rank?
So we utilize whatever assessment, whatever has been done in terms of screening and formative assessment to determine students in it. We're looking for students that read for rewards at about the 3rd grade level or above. We actually found, let's say we have a student that reads accurately 5th grade materials, but does not read with automaticity, and they would benefit tremendously. So studies that were not done by myself, but at the University of Washington, they utilized rewards at the beginning of 4th grade with all 4th graders in a whole district in the state of Washington. And they found that the students that were the highest performers actually made significant gains in fluency and automaticity. And that students that were sort of in the middle part of the population, they gained in accuracy and fluency both. And the students that were the lowest performing students gained significantly in accuracy. So that all those groups of 4th graders gained. They didn't have any students who didn't gain, but you know, good teaching should lead to like woo learning. So I am interested in what part of these recommendations that we went through briefly, knowing that you're going to follow up, maybe have a book study with your colleagues on, spoke to you in terms of practices that you could add. Maybe it was having short reading for the purpose, for purposes, repeated readings 3 or 4 times, but with a purpose. Maybe it was the getting the gist strategy. Maybe it was asking 3 kinds of questions, the right there question, the search questions, and the author and me questions. Would you pop that into the chat box as you're thinking about questions that Lisa will be watching for in the chat?
And Anita, there was a question too about your keynote this morning, if the checklists are embedded in those slides.
The checklists are embedded in the slides. They're also, I put them, repeated them at the end of the PowerPoint so that you could just print them out with more ease.
Great.
I do think they are a really good guidance of looking at, you know, sort of this spring, looking at our program. Are there areas that we could make a difference in? And some of them, without taking up a lot of time, like getting our primary teachers to read more informational text so that we're building background knowledge from the get-go. So some of them just could be fit right into what you're doing, but make a bigger difference.
There was a question about for additional recommendations for students who are entering accelerated programs, some of like two years of advancement. I'm thinking in particular of a student who is currently in 2nd grade and preparing to enter an accelerated program. So we'll jump not only from learning to read and reading to learn, but from 2nd to basically 5th grade reading. What would you recommend focusing on now to prepare the student?
Well, so they've decided the second grade child could work at the 5th grade level. That was okay. And so they must have already assumed that the child was able to read accurately and fluently 5th grade material. Now, because of their having less experience, though, it would be dependent on the amount of vocabulary and background knowledge that they had. But if they had determined it, how do you prepare them? Say good luck. Because they've already determined that they were adequate for it. They would already determined that they could read accurately and fluently and have enough vocabulary and background knowledge. Now, here's where the problem will occur, though, Lisa, and that is in their writing. And one of the things that was not addressed in this practice guide was having students write in response to what they've read. To me, if we had gotten to that this morning, which I didn't, one of the things that I'm trying to do is much more writing in response to what we have read, whether it just be a brain drain, write down everything that you have learned about the Lakota tribe, or write down what you've learned about the country of Kenya. And so then the students write down, well, Kenya was not a country before colonization, and that's why it has difficulties, because there's many different groups of people, different histories, different languages, different customs, different traditions. I love brain drains. They are high outcome, low prep. Just asking them to write down 2 things that you learned, so that they have more writing. And then I would be certain that I had also looked at the work of Judith Hochman in the Writing Revolution, which you would come up with very good ways to connect the writing to comprehension. So that, for example, the whole chapter on sentences that could be written in response to content. My favorite is because, but, so. We have a statement, and that then has the conjunction of because, a reason, and but, a change of direction, and so, a why. So that would be what I would check out with that 2nd grader going to 5th grade. Is there facility in writing? It was an interesting question. Very seldom, as a person who has been years and years in intervention special ed, talked about many kids going from 2nd to 5th grade material. So thank you.